Hi, friends. It's me, Eve Sturgis. This is the podcast, Everything's Relative. This project is about me finding people who want to talk about the ways that modern DNA testing has changed their lives for better or worse. Welcome to Welcome to episode 16, which is, excitingly, the final episode of season 1. I did it. We did it. 32 weeks of talking about all this stuff that I didn't know about or even think about even existing like a year ago. So, and the amazing thing is that these 16 episodes was only the tip of the iceberg. There is so much to keep talking about. I'm not going to be posting episodes through the holidays, but I'm still recording them. I still have people contacting me all the time. I still have lots of things I want to talk about, all sorts of angles I want to explore. This phenomenon isn't stopping just because I need a little break. So this episode 16, is a little bit different because it's my time with Julie Dixon Jackson, host of another podcast that is about similar things. It's called Cut Off Genes. That's genes spelled Genes. And her podcast explores genealogy in a different way. She's a genealogist, but she brings it to her listeners in like layman's terms, and she talks about stuff, and she explores cultural things that are happening in pop culture, and just really great. And she also includes lots of people's stories, just like me. So she's informing and educating and discussing, and it brings in a new perspective and voice. It's and her own humor. So it's really great. So if this is my podcast or this topic has been interesting to you, please definitely check out Cut Off Genes. Again, that's Cut Off Genes, spelled Genes. And like the picture, the little logo is like of a pair of cut off jean shorts with a little DNA helix on the leg. So it shouldn't be too hard to find. But please go find it, subscribe, listen, get yourself more informed and become more aware of this whole phenomenon that's going on and sort of sweeping the world. It feels like a really special and fun way to end my first season of podcasting. If you don't listen to the whole thing, you might miss it. But in our final minutes together, I say something that I'm going to say more about after, and I think is a great way to end season 1 and launch us into season 2. So I really hope that you hang around until the end. I'll see you on the other side in about an hour, less than an hour. Here's my episode with Julie Dixon Jackson, episode 16. This is Everything's Relative. I'm Eve Sturgis. Thank you so much for being along with me, and I'll talk to you in a little bit. Bye. Hi, everybody. So here's what we're going to do today. I have got Julie Dixon Jackson from the podcast Cut Off Genes here with me. In fact, I'm with her.
Actually, yes, you're here with me.
I'm at her house,
yes.
Here in Los Angeles. Very exciting that we're in the same town and we can do this face to face. We're having a kind of crossover episode. So she interviewed me on her podcast, and now I am going to interview her, and it will be on my podcast.
Mm-hmm. So go back.
Yeah.
If you want to hear the first half of this, go back.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it will be a little bit like Choose Your Own Adventure, and you can listen to it in either order.
Yeah, it probably doesn't matter, does it?
Right.
Oh, good point. Yeah, you're smart.
So we connected and said, let's do something together. And so I went on to her podcast and talked about what I just said. I'm going to repeat myself. Talked about my story, and now she's here, and I'm going to ask her about her story, and she's going to tell me. And I also have a couple questions about, she calls herself a Gen Genie. So I have questions about that. But why don't you just tell us the story of your own, would you call it an NPE?
I have both.
Okay.
I'm an adoptee with an NPE component.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm an adoptee, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I grew up always knowing I was adopted. I grew up in Australia and was just a thing. And was very clear within my family that I was not of them and they were not of me, which which is fine. And it's good that I knew I was adopted because at least we all knew there was a reason for it. But because of that and because I asked a lot of questions, my parents always knew that I would search one day.
Oh.
They just knew that that was what I was going to do. And they were just like, tell us when you're going to do it. It's fine. And they supported me and it was hunky-dory. So when I was 21, I got access to my original adoption records. In Australia, there was a thing, there was a new law that allowed you to have whatever they had. And I'm taking my headphones off now because I feel like I'm in some kind of a box. Okay. So I could get my records and was able to see identifying information for both my parents or whatever had been written at the time. And it talked about the rest of their family. It talked about her hobbies, vital statistics, stuff like that, and had addresses and phone numbers.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Surreal. Yeah. It was like, when you're an adoptee, you're always like, what would happen? What would happen if I had her number in my hand? What would happen if I,
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I had this. Of course, this was 1989 and, there was no internet.
Right.
And at the time I was on a cruise ship working. And
I was going to say, wait, you were on a cruise when this information came to you.
I was working on a cruise ship. We had to stop in San Francisco, and I had to meet with a therapist, a marriage and family therapist, or whatever, a family therapist, in order for me to be given the records.
Oh,
because she had to make sure that I was stable enough to get this information. I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
They just didn't want you to be alone.
Yeah, maybe there's that too. Yeah. But yeah, so had a little. Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Give me my envelope. So I had this stuff. Called the place that I'd originally got it from, which happened to be the exact building that I was adopted from.
Okay.
I was in a Methodist baby's home for the first 2 months of my life, and then it became the Copeland Street Family Center later, and then they also started helping people reunite and all that stuff.
That makes more sense to have it called the family center, but baby's home is sort of sweet and old-fashioned or terrible and a nightmare. I can't just it's both sides of it.
I have it kind of gives me nightmares only because in all of my research, and I've done a lot of research, I've found memorabilia and stuff from that building, and I have it actually on one of my Facebook group pages. There was a sign on the wall of the ward that said, "Please do not touch the babies."
Oh,
and that was for visitors, obviously. Right. But it made me so sad to see because who touched me?
Right.
And who knows how many babies were in there and how many nurses and who responded to my needs or did they? And I truly believe that first 2 months of my life has to do with a lot of my issues now.
Sure.
Yeah.
100% believe it.
Yeah. And my parents said when they brought me home, I was just, they called me a blob because I would just lay there and not expect anything.
Right.
And not, you know what I mean? Because I was conditioned to say, well, no point in making any noise.
Right. There's no need.
Yeah.
No needs.
Yeah. Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
Yeah, it bums me out. So I found that, and I also found an advertisement from the 40s or the 30s and had a picture of like these 3 little blonde babies, and it said the Methodist Babies Home. Oh, what was it? Something like helping slum babies since so and so.
No.
It was saying that all the babies there were basically taken from the slums of Melbourne and put into this place for rich people to which wasn't
save
my
them.
case. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So
the language of charity.
Yeah, really. Yeah, really. So I digress. So I had this information. I called them at this baby's home. I said, "Okay, I want to contact," and they said, "Well, you're not allowed to contact." Yeah. So we'll do it for you.
Oh.
So I was like, all right. I was on the ship anyway. I had to do my contract. So when I got home, I'd not heard from them, so I called them, and the woman who was working on my case was no longer there, and nobody had picked it up, and I was like, well, you guys are useless to me.
It's almost like bureaucracy has been complicated and difficult forever.
Yes, exactly. So I decided that, as is my way, if I want something done right, I have to do it myself. So I just decided to start looking for her myself.
So you had a name.
I had a name, and I had the town that she was from. The phone number was for my. I don't know if I even tried that phone number, or I can't remember actually offhand if there was a phone number. But there was a lot of identifying information. But I knew her name, and I knew the town that she lived in. So I called. At that time, we had the international operator.
Okay.
So I called the international operator, and I got the information operator for the town that she was from. And her last name was Price. I can say it now. And I said, can you give me as many listings for L Price as you can in that town? And she's like, well, I can only give you 5 at a time. I'm like, okay, well, give me the first 5, and then I'll call
hang
back.
up and call back.
Yes, exactly. So I just started
L as
calling.
in the letter L, or L
Lynette
as in
Price.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know if it was
Yes.
ELLE. Okay.
Ooh, fancy. So I started calling, and as is my way, the second or third call, woman answers and said, is there a Lynette Price there? And she said, well, no, Price is my husband's name. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, but I knew a Lynette Price.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And I said, what do you mean you knew a Lynette Price? She said, well, I went to school with a Lynette Price. And I said, well, where was that? And she said, whatever school, that was probably where Lynn went to school. And I said, how old would she be now? And she said, oh, about 45, 46. I said, okay. Do you remember her having a lot of siblings? She said, yeah, I think so. And just I described her the way that it was, and she said, you know what? You're calling from so far away. Why don't I make some calls around town, see if I can find anything about her?
So you also told her
no,
you didn't tell her
she
why
said,
you were looking for
yeah,
her.
I said she's a friend of my mother's.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of true. I didn't lie.
She played a very important role in your mother's life.
Yes, exactly. So so she said, call me back in 24 hours. I'll see if I can find anything out. This is Australians for you.
It's also, I feel like, yeah, I don't know if would Australians still do that? Because I feel like
yes,
they would. Because I feel like that's such a old. It just sounds like it just has to have been years and years ago.
It was years and years ago, but I did it again recently with my search for my father, and the same thing happened.
People are just
I mean, mostly some people would be like, I'm not comfortable telling you this stuff, but more often than not, and I do think I have a magical phone voice, but more often than not, people will talk to me.
I have another question about when you call Australia.
Yeah,
do you drop into an Australian accent when you call?
No, but the longer I talk to them, the more I start.
The more like lilting it begins. Okay.
Yeah.
It becomes. Go.
Yes, you should hear me. Last time I went to Australia, I came back with a full Australian accent. My kids are like, "You're talking different." Anyway, so I was like, "Great," and so I didn't make any more calls. I said, "Okay, I was overwhelmed that I was doing this, and I was like, I need a break anyway, so I'll give myself a 24-hour break." Call her back 24 hours later, not really expecting anything. And she says, Julie, I have her phone number for you. I said, what do you mean you have her phone? She said, well, my dad is one of the few cab drivers in town.
Oh my gosh.
And he knows your grandfather, who still lives in the same house he used to live in. So he walked up to his house, knocked on his door, and asked for Lynn's phone number.
Of course.
And
he gave it to him.
Yeah. I said, you've got to be kidding. And she said, yeah, she's in Western Australia on the other side of the country. But here's her number.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know what's sad? I don't remember that woman's name. I don't remember. You know what I mean? I was so overwhelmed at the time. I never thought to keep it and all that.
Sure.
So, one day, maybe, no, it's never going to happen. So now I have my mother's phone number in my hand. It's that moment in your life. And I was about to call, and then I realized that it was a Saturday night in May, and it was in Australia. It was Mother's Day.
Oh.
And I thought that would be weird as hell for me to do that. So I said, I'll wait until tomorrow and then I'll call on the Monday because she'll have family around her. And what if it's a big secret? And I don't want to, I'm like you in that I don't want anyone to be uncomfortable.
Right.
Right. So I went to bed. Tossed and turned, tossed and turned, tossed and turned. Couldn't get to sleep. It's 3 a.m. Screw it. I just have to do it. Rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
So I called her. Long story short, she answered the phone. Very familiar voice. I said, is this Lynette? She said, yes, it is. And I said, did you have a baby on such and such a date? She said, yes, I did. And I said, well, I'm her. And she said, well, that's lovely. And we had this lovely conversation. And it was that.
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah. Well, that's lovely.
Had the agency been in touch with her?
Not the agency. Okay. My grandfather had.
Oh, okay.
So he had called her and said, I just gave your phone number to a cab driver. And apparently there's an American looking for you. And she said that she had no idea what it could be, but her husband, John, who she married 3 months after my birth, said, it's that daughter of yours. She's coming looking for you. So they knew.
Right.
So it was all swell. And
that's lovely.
Yeah. It was just very easy. And I was in my early 20s at the time and very easygoing and not very opinionated. And I think that's why it's a good time to reach out to people because you're more accepting of, I want to say you're more accepting of differences, but that's not really how I am now either. I think I'm more accepting of people as a whole. But you know what? You're more more comfortable in different situations. Okay. Like nowadays, I would never imagine going and staying in a stranger's home overnight for a week. So when 6 months later, I flew out there and met them and I stayed at their house for a week. Right. And it was all, great. This is my life now. And it was terrific. I couldn't do that now. Right. I think I'm just so, I need my space. And I think wasn't aware that things needed to be processed back then.
Right. That's what I'm watching you and I know what you're saying and I'm trying to think.
Does that make sense?
I'm trying to think of the words as well to describe it, but it has something to do with taking things at face value it
was more like, look at that. Yeah. Okay. Whereas now I'm like, I'm not comfortable. I need to retreat. And I've also become a lot more of an introvert since then. I've kind of, become that or leaned into my, I'm an extroverted introvert. Right.
Lean into your contemplative side.
Yes. And I like solitude. I need it. So there you go. And I didn't seem to back then for some reason. So there you go.
I didn't. So that must, there's something about being in your 20s.
Yeah. Where you're just, I was fine with, when I was on the cruise ship, I shared a tiny room with other people. Totally. And I could never do that now. So there are things that are meant to be done when you're young so there you go. All right. Boom. Oh, it's still recording. Okay. I thought it had stopped. I was like, oh no, it stopped. Okay. All right. End of that. It was great. Kept in contact with her.
Was there a story? Was there a story to your birth or existence or conception or how old she was?
Yes. The story was she was 21. Not that young. Okay. The story was that she had been dating this guy who was very good looking and but very into himself, and
they always are.
Yes. And she had one experience with him and got pregnant, and he bailed. Okay. The same old. And I asked her a few questions about him, but she didn't. She was like, no, he only cares about himself. I don't think you should look for him because he's. And at that time, I didn't really want to, because I was overwhelmed already with all the newness, and I was like, whatever. Started having kids 10 years later, and that was when I realized that, oh my God, I'm so connected to these children. Right, I have to know. They need to be with me at all times, and I realized that there is a whole half of me I know nothing about. for me to pass on to them.
Yeah.
And I'm a completist.
Yeah. Well, having children
Oh, yeah.
it just changes the way that you experience the world.
Yes.
In a way that is like internal and in your mind and sort of existential.
Yes, existential. That's good.
And of course it changes your world. We all know that having children changes your world. But I mean, there are like cerebral changes that you just don't see coming. Yeah.
Yes. So true. So I started thinking about it when I had my daughter, and started asking my mother questions. She was pretty vague. Like sometimes names were slightly different.
When you say asking your mother,
my biological mother.
Your biological mother.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Adoptive mother knew nothing.
Okay.
And also when I'd met them the first time, I'd been at my aunt's house, and she had taken me aside and given me a photograph. And she said, "These are all 4 of your grandparents." So, and I was like, "Oh, well, thanks for that." And then years later, I found that again, and I'm like, "Did she say these are all 4 of my grandparents?" So I called her and I said, "What's the story of this picture?" And she said, "Well, Malcolm, who was my father, and his mother was friends with our parents, and they used to dance together. They were like in dance contests and stuff."
Okay.
And
I've seen Strictly Ballroom. I know exactly what it was like.
Wouldn't it be funny if it was? I would love that. But so they knew each other socially, and they'd been to each other's houses. And so I'm like, well, then why can't Lynn tell me more about this family? So, and then I would go to Lynn and I say, well, Val said this and this. And she goes, oh yeah, I guess that's right. So I couldn't tell whether she was being withholding or just really didn't remember.
Or didn't want to remember.
remember.
Yeah. And I don't know, if you can't remember something, I don't know how one can decipher whether they really don't remember for themselves. Like the more I become familiar with denial through this experience.
Wait till you're
going
to hear more about that.
I'll be quiet.
All right.
I'm quiet.
So then I went on and I had my son, and then it became more of this thing that I really wanted to. And the more I was like held back, the more I wanted my answers. So, and I kept questioning Lynn. I was like, are you sure this is the spelling of his name? Are you sure? La, 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 la. And she said, I've told you all I know. I don't, and she told me his mother's name, and she didn't know his father's name, and this is where they lived, and she had like rented a room because she ran a boarding house, and yeah, all this crazy stuff. And I could not find anybody of his name anywhere. And I looked in the Electoral Rolls, which is basically the census, except for it gives you less information, but at least it gives you addresses of where people are and who they're married to. And I could not find him anywhere. However, I remembered hearing that that he may have gone out of state. Like somebody at the baby's home had said, yeah, we believe he's in Adelaide now, which is another city. And South Australia does not release their electoral rolls.
Oh.
So maybe that was true. I'm thinking that. Also, I know my grandmother's name. I'm looking for anything on her. Can't find it for the life of me. In the meantime, I'm now on Ancestry. I found, and I'm writing random people with that name, that last name, which is a very common name.
Oh no!
Going, hey, do you think la la? And I hadn't even done DNA yet.
Right.
This is how desperate I was,
so just
and
every John Smith in the world you just were reaching out to. Yeah. I mean, why not?
Yeah, really? Why not? We got to lose at this point. So then one day, I saw somebody's tree, and she had a form of that name in her tree, and she was Australian. And anyone that was Australian that had the name in their tree, I would contact.
Sure. And
she had a pretty full tree, so I thought, well, maybe she knows what she's doing. So I talked to her, and not expecting anything, and I told her my grandmother's name, and her approximate age, and where she lived, and blah 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 blah. Well, she knew things that I didn't know about searching.
Aha.
And she came back with my grandparents' marriage.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, I knew I had my grandparents' marriage, when both of their full names, when they got married, and where. And I had a whole new thing to run on.
Right.
So then I started doing the genealogy, and I knew her maiden name. That was the big thing. Now that I knew her maiden name, I could start looking up that
you
name.
Another
yes,
road.
And it was not as common a name as the married name. So long story short, I start making phone calls again, and this is 6 years ago, 6 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
just so recently.
Yeah, very recently.
Okay.
So
I was still stuck in like 1989 on the cruise ship.
No, this was years later.
I mean,
yeah.
I knew you said you'd had children and things, but I just...
Yeah, no, I'm elderly now.
In the movie version, you had shoulder pads.
Yes,
on
and very big perm hair.
On a cruise ship.
Yes,
okay.
But now I have a pixie.
Got
and,
it.
Yeah, and stretch marks. So, and I started doing the phone calling in. And this family had two, there looked like a large version of that family in one part of the state and another version in another part of the state that were not connected, but there were a lot of them in either, So I started calling the numbers around where there were the most of them that had that name. And once again, second call in.
Of course.
I said, the name was Brunt, and I said, are you related to Arlene Brunt? That was my grandmother. And
that is such a grandmother name.
I know. And she said, well, Brunt is my husband's name, but yeah, I think it was his aunt. And I said, did she have a son named Malcolm? And she said, yeah, he did. She did. Yeah. I was like, what? And I had to say, I just need for you to know what's happening right now. And I gave her the breakdown of you need to understand
this is a really big deal.
This is a big deal. She was divine. And she told me this stuff, and she said, you need to call my sister-in-law because she is the family genealogist and she'll be able to tell you so much more.
Genius.
Yes. Call her. She tells me as much as she can. She remembers my father, hasn't seen him in years. No one has seen him in years, but they told me a lot about
mysterious
him. Blah,
Malcolm.
blah, blah. Yes, the mysterious Malcolm. And we're talking back and forth, and I still can't find him. And then in one of the notes I got from one, they said, oh, by the way, these are his kids' names.
Oh.
And the daughters both had unusual first names. So I was like, huh. Facebook.
Right.
So I go to Facebook. I type in the name of one.
Kaboom.
Up it comes. There's her. There's her sister. And there's the brother. And they're all there. And there's the aunt that my aunt was present at her birth and helped name her. Yeah. So I'd done it.
Yeah.
There I was. So I then started contacting. So I decided to go through the aunt first.
What did you do in that moment? What happened for you?
You kind of sit back and you take a breath and you say, this is that moment again. This is it. And you know what? I had more fear this time. The last time I had the sense that everything was going to be okay. I didn't think she would reject me. But this time, and in fact, I was writing a blog and I remember writing, however, this time I knew it might hurt.
Do you think that came with age, time and age, that you just had a bigger understanding of? Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
I had no concept that she might reject me back then. But with him, especially what I'd heard about him, I was definitely,
right.
And although I was very prepared for rejection, I've always been prepared for rejection because you're an adoptee. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, go in expecting the worst, but hoping for the best. Right. And whatever happens, happens. So, long story short, I finally get through to Kim, my aunt, and she's lovely. And then she says, I'm going to process this. I need to give me a few days. I'm going to contact him and then I'll let you know what's happening. It's a few days. I still haven't heard from her. I'm starting to get crazy anxious. So I reach out. I'm like, I know you needed a few days, but
I don't mean to pester.
Yeah, it's been this many years. And she writes back and says, I've spoken to Malcolm. He is thrilled, and here's his phone number.
Oh.
Yeah.
She just hadn't gotten around to writing you back.
Maybe she had
something.
just.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Who knows?
They had seen each other in that time because apparently that was like a time for them to say, we should get together and talk about this or something. I don't know.
I just love the idea of her not being in any rush to get you that information.
I know. Or maybe she had just gotten it.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Totally. But even
know.
if she had just,
anyway. I know. So
I'm writing the screenplay in my mind.
Yes.
Let me have her. Let me have the character I want.
So I have this number, and once again, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. Here I go. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say this, but when I called last time, I made sure there was nobody else around. Like my parents were already in bed, and I don't ever want to do that stuff in front of anybody. And I didn't want to do this in front of my family. I just wanted it to be my thing and be control, because I didn't know how I was going to, you understand. So I called him.
It's vulnerable.
It's very vulnerable. I called him. He answers. Actually, a lady answers, and she says, just a minute, he's driving. He's going to pull over, darling. She called me darling. And then he gets on the phone, and he says, hello, young lady. And he has this jovial voice and blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And it was like, and I immediately started smiling like, oh, my gosh, she's great.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's talking, and so I think the first 10 minutes, I didn't get a word in edgewise. He just went off and off and off. I can't believe this happened to you. Why didn't you tell me? I've been to America. I used to get my cars from America. I could have taken care of you. Why wouldn't she have told me about you? Blah, 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 blah.
That's a lot.
Yes. And
okay.
yeah. And in 10 minutes in, I was like, oh, this guy's a sociopath.
Oh, right.
And Lynn was absolutely right. That he is completely doesn't take responsibility for anything.
Sure.
Wouldn't know a lie if it bit him in the ass.
Just
wouldn't know the truth if it bit him in the ass.
Right.
Just
says anything and everything.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That sounds good in the moment. Right.
Mm-hmm. So I started to have this sinking feeling.
Oh,
like, oh no, I'm
Julie.
not going to get any information from him, am I? Mm-hmm. So, and he just kept saying, and he said, that day when, last time I saw your mother, I'm like, well, what happened? What are you talking about? And he told me some story about he was walking down the street and he just had this new pair of trousers on to go to a dance, and he saw her walking towards him and she was wearing flat shoes, and she saw him and then started crying and ran right past him. And that was the last time he saw her.
Okay.
And Lynn never said that.
Right.
Anything
it's not
like
any
that.
version of the events that you go.
Right. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then, so he just kept talking and talking and talking. Maybe 15 minutes in, I realized he had not asked me a single question about myself. And I said,
It was like another opportunity for someone to look upon me.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I finally, about 15 minutes in, I said, so do you have any questions for me? And he said, yes. When are you coming to visit me? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I don't know you. So, we have, and he goes, oh, you want to come see your dad, don't you? And I'm like, A, you are not my dad.
Right.
I have a dad. So he just goes on, and he never asked me about my children, never asked me what I did for a living, never asked me how I got here, never. And
how was your life?
Yes. Yeah. Didn't. Nothing. Just went on and on and on. Started dropping in. This is another sociopath thing. Started dropping in names of celebrities that were somehow connected to him.
Yeah.
And you know this, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And I will call people out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can't say anything because he won't talk to me, and I want him to talk to me. I want information.
Right.
So I talked for maybe 45 minutes, and I was like, okay, well, let's talk in a few days, and blah, 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 blah. And I hung up,
I feel heavy about that. Like, I feel like a
I did
weight of
too.
having to listen to him for 45 minutes.
It was
like
torture. It was torture. It was exhausting. And
which is also a sociopath sign, by the way.
Yes. Oh, yes. I know. I've had a few in my life. So I go back, and my husband and daughter are in the back in his office, and they're like, "How was that?" I'm like, "I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how to feel right now. I mean, I've done it, and I guess I don't believe him."
Right.
I don't feel, and my brother was a sociopath, or is a sociopath, and so I know a sociopath, and I know that you're not going to get anywhere with them,
right?
Ever. So that was a bummer.
Yeah.
But I had siblings,
right,
and family that I could, because I'm already a genealogist, so I can finally find out about my family and do all the research and stuff like that. Blah blah blah. Contacted. I feel like this is so long-winded right now.
No, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Okay.
I'm literally like the chair. I'm like sitting here.
Well, okay,
like,
so on my podcast, I tell a chapter a week.
Right. Okay.
So, and right now, I'm basically telling the whole
you're
story.
doing the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I contacted
you have got my attention.
sister. Yes.
Yeah.
So I contacted my sister on Facebook. And finally, she like responded like, "Hi." And I was like, "Hi, how are you?" She goes, "Good, how are you?" And I'm like, "Do you know who I am?" And she said, "I don't think so." And I said, "Well, what do you know?"
Like, I'm just being friendly.
No. She said, "Well, my father was just here, which is very unusual."
Oh, okay.
And he said, "I have another sister." And I said, "I know I have another sister. Her name is whatever her name is." And he said, no. There's another sister, and her name is this.
Yeah.
So she knew that that's who I was. But then, and I said, "What, is that all he told you? What, he didn't tell you anything else?" She said, "My father talks in circles."
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That must have felt validating.
Oh, so validating.
And relieving, yeah.
And, so we talked a little bit back and forth. And finally I said, "What's his deal? Tell me about him." And she's like, can we talk on the phone? And I'm like, "Yep, I'll go home right now and call you." So I call her, we're talking, and finally I said...
They're all in Australia?
They're in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah. And finally I said, "He's a pathological liar, isn't he?" And she said, "I'm so glad you said that."
Oh, yeah.
She said, "No, he is estranged from everybody in the family because he cannot tell the truth. He's abandoned everybody in the family," and blah, blah, blah. I said, I knew it. I could tell immediately, first 5 minutes of talking to him. So I had an uphill battle.
Wow, it's like you have a superpower.
Yeah.
But it came from knowing other people like
Yes,
this. So
exactly.
It's like
Oh,
I
exactly.
wouldn't wish it on anybody,
No.
but I'm so
Yeah.
impressed.
So so there you go. I found him. I spoke to him a few more times. He still talked in circles, still wanted me to come visit him, stay at his house. I was not going to stay at his house. But in the meantime, I had connected with my sister, my one sister, and we got along great. And she actually came here and we visited, she and her fiance, and it was really cool. Then December, I was going to go to Australia and visit everybody. And by this time, I'd done the genealogy for the whole family. I'd found all these family secrets that I was going to tell everybody. And I was going to meet him. I didn't really want to, but I wanted to get his DNA.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So-
yeah. Like a completion.
Yes.
You said earlier, you're a completist or a
Yes, I'm a
completer.
completist, yes.
Like, yeah.
So I go there and I plan a 2-week trip and I fly in. I go see my mother first. She's fine with me, finding him. She's like, no big deal. Then I fly to Adelaide. My sister picks me up. I go to a little family event, blah, blah, blah. Then she and I go to his house.
Uh-huh.
Oh, God, it was uncomfortable. It was so
wow.
weird. And here's the thing. She is his favorite, but because she's the only one who'll still take his crap.
Okay.
So she still talks to him occasionally, but the others don't even talk to him. But she kept following us around the house, and he was uncomfortable with her being there because he couldn't tell his lies.
Right. Oh.
because he had told me things that were different than what he'd ever told her. And so he had to keep his lies straight.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay.
And she thought it was hilarious.
Right.
So we kept like going from room to room to room. Oh my gosh. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's kind of funny. I mean, like,
Yeah. Yeah,
that's a lot. There's just a lot happening.
Yes, so much. So we were there for about 2.5 hours, and I said, do not leave without me.
Yeah.
And he gave me a bunch of photo albums, and, we talked, and, it was all very surface and I couldn't really get to him. But it was great that he gave me pictures, and I was able to look at his albums, and he's like, I don't know who that is. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that's Aunt Lily. Because I know.
Right. You could work together to fill in the blanks.
Yep. And then we were done. And we left, and I had such a headache and so much relief.
Yeah.
that it was done, and I didn't have to ever see him again. It was so like, yeah.
Did he give you DNA?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Before he left, he did give me DNA. I sat there and watched him do it.
Okay. Spit into the tube like I just did?
Yes,
okay.
just like that. I've watched a lot of people do it now. And did it. Boom, we're done. Next day, one of my best friends from childhood flies into Adelaide. We rent a car. We do a road trip back to Victoria.
Fun.
On the way, it was great. On the way, we stopped at 4 different relatives' houses and had little mini reunions, like my grandmother's last living sister.
Oh, wow.
And the woman who had helped me, who I'd spoken to first, and her brothers and sisters, and
it's like a history
two
tour.
people in Melbourne. Yeah, it was
something.
awesome.
Yeah.
It was great. And it was so cool and so gratifying, and I was exhausted. And it was done. And I came home. And I sent the DNA in New Year's Eve of 2014. The results come back. He's not my dad.
Yeah, my face is...
I knew that you were doing that. Yeah, not my dad. Not my dad. Yeah.
Oh, Lynette. Okay.
So... And I did this thing where this is the first time I just started doing DNA. And I was like, oh, well, this must be a mistake. This must happen all the time. They just got his vial confused. And there's somebody else with DNA with results.
Somewhere on the line, there's a human. Like there must be human error somewhere.
Yeah, there has to be.
Right.
So I, of course, go in the message boards. I was on all the 23andMe message boards, always, just on all of them. And because people have been following my story. And I said, hey,
oh no.
how many of you have this happened to? And I expect people to say, oh yeah, it happens all the time. It happened to me. And people just kept saying, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. I'm so sorry. And I was like, no. But wait, no, I'm different.
But what if it's a mistake? Right.
Yeah. And it was a Friday, and so I couldn't get through to anybody at 23andMe. I spent that whole weekend trying to make sense of it and I call Lynn. I said, hey, if you're not by yourself right now, why don't you take a walk around the block so we can talk in private? So she did, because
That's nice of you.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was, an error or a secret. And I said, hey, weird thing, Malcolm's DNA came back not my dad. And she said, oh, that is weird. That casually.
Yeah. Okay.
And I said, that's all you got? I mean,
right.
Are you sure it was him? She's like, oh, absolutely. And I'm like, but it doesn't, I called the company and they said, we don't make these mistakes. They're sending another test, but they said it's never happened before. But a lot of people discover that what they thought wasn't so with these tests. And she said, well, and I said, look, Lynn, there's no judgment.
Real talk, Lynn.
Yes. And she kept saying, well, I told you I didn't drink. I didn't do any of that stuff. I wasn't loose. I wasn't promiscuous. So her whole thing was about she didn't want to be perceived as promiscuous.
Totally.
And I was like, you need to get over that.
Yeah.
We've all been there, She stuck to her guns.
Wow.
And I said, well, I guess it must be John then, her husband.
Yeah, that was my next guess.
Yeah. And she said, well, I was already pregnant when I met him. I said, well, maybe you had a miscarriage and got pregnant again.
Yeah.
And maybe the dates were off. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sending you a test. And suddenly it made sense because, by the way, I'm 5'4". Lynn is 5'9".
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm's 6 foot.
Aha.
John's 5'6".
Okay.
5'5", 5'6". I was like, oh, wait a minute. So I sent them the test thinking, well, that must be it. And came back, nope. Not him. I grilled her over and over, and I just kept, like, I would talk to her until she didn't want to talk about it anymore and couldn't. And I was like, just tell me, She started giving me hints.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Not so much hints, but I thought they were hints. And she would just mention, like, guys that she had dated. And he would always be like, I didn't sleep with him, but blah, 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 blah. So any guy that she said she dated or been around, I literally hunted down their families and had them take DNA tests. I did it 3 times.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of them,
None of them,
by the way.
All right.
So there you go. That's, and that's that. And I didn't, nothing happened. I knew I had to wait until a closer match came in.
Yeah.
Finally, a closer match came in.
Oh, good. Okay. I was like, please don't just, that's it. You're like, and here we are. Just still waiting. Okay.
Yes. So closer match came in. Clouds opened. And by now, I'd been studying a lot on genetic genealogy. I was in all the Facebook groups. And so I knew what I was going to have to do. I'd spoken personally to Cece Moore, who said, I will help you as soon as you get a close enough match. And, she'd read my blog and was into it. And so this new match comes in, and I go on to DNA Detective and said, you guys, I have this. And Cece wasn't around, so she couldn't,
right.
So, but there was a DNA detective, a search angel in Australia, in my hometown, that said, hey, I'll help you. And so she helped me build what was then called a mirror tree, and we looked at and she told me exactly what to do. And I basically learned how to do what I do now from doing my own thing, from her teaching me.
That's cool.
Yeah. And did this whole tree of this kid. He turns out he's my first cousin once removed.
Okay.
And built the whole tree up, was concentrating on one side because they were from Melbourne, and the other side was from New South Wales. Well, I got to a certain point where I realized, oh, it's not that side, it's this side. So I started working there. And in the meantime, I'd been like looking at his Facebook page and looking at all people who could be relatives of him and trying to find. We finally get down to the Fisher line. And his grandmother must be my aunt, which means one of her brothers is my father.
Right. I'm following. Okay.
Only 2 of them were living when I was born.
Okay.
And only one of them is living now. And the other one, they don't know where he is.
Oh.
But the one that's not living, he is on Facebook. I mean, his son is on, one of his, that's weird.
He's a ghost.
From beyond. Ooh, wouldn't it be cool if they could do that?
Yeah.
So I reach out to Rob, and it's funny because I'd seen his page and I'd gone back to it a few times, and there was something about him that I was like, I could be related to this kid.
Yeah.
And the way he talked, the way he wrote, the way he talked about his family, his pictures, I just felt connected. I don't even know how else to explain it. But I was like, yeah, he's like me.
Felt right.
Yeah. So I reached out to him, told him the whole story. And he was like, wow, this is a lot. And I told him the whole thing, and I sent him to the blog. And I was basically like, and your dad could be my dad.
Right.
And he's like, well, I guess there's only one way to find out.
Right.
So he took a test. And, we waited.
Oh, my God.
However many weeks. Finally came back. He's my half-brother. I know my
Wow.
So his father was my father. And the other, because it was out of him and the other brother.
Right.
We couldn't find any of the other brother's relatives. And his match for a half-sibling was kind of on the low end. So for a while, we were like, what if he's an outlier this way? What if he's a first cousin? It was like a few weeks later, another first cousin, one of Max's sons had tested, and he came back as a first cousin. So finally, it was like,
you had
we're done.
Measurement.
Yes. So now I know who my father was for sure.
Rob's dad.
Rob's dad.
Okay.
Clive Fisher.
Clive. Okay.
Yeah. So, and he passed away 10 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. The good thing is that he was a letter writer.
Oh.
And I was too. My cousins have all these books that my grandfather had kept, in which he transcribed all of the letters from his kids to him over the years.
Oh my God.
And for a while they would take a picture of one letter and send it to me so I could read it.
Oh my gosh.
And I have all of this information about my dad. He writes like me. He talks like me. He has my sense of humor. He has that stream of consciousness, you know, when he's writing like, la, 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 la. Oh my gosh, I just got back. There was an accident outside. And this, you know what I mean? It was incredible. Just
wow,
to like
that sounds...
to see who he is. I'm like, I know him better than I know my mother because he was descriptive.
Right.
And one weird thing about this whole thing, it starts in like 1962 and goes right up to, I get up to like February of 1964 and August, I think, of sorry, it doesn't matter.
No,
April of 1964, something like that. I'm like, I'm about to be conceived. I know I was conceived in July or August of 64. And I'm waiting.
So you're just...
I'm waiting.
Like pins and needles.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, what? He's going to talk about my mother. And the next one I get is October of 1964.
Oh.
He's on a boat to England.
What?
He's on a boat to England. He's going to meet his pen pal who'd send him a bikini picture.
Oh.
And he decided he wanted to go to England and meet her. And so he got on a boat and was in England. Then I read all these letters from when he was in England talking about, and then he ran out of money or something. Got on a boat, came back, landed in Sydney on the day I was born.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
April 7th. He landed in Sydney. And he'd met some girl on the boat, and so they were like doing a road trip back to Melbourne.
Sounds like young people.
He was,
Sounds like young.
he very much liked the ladies. Yes. And
he so often did.
Yes.
Did and do.
Yes, indeed. So, and then it cut off for a few more months, and then it started up again, and he had just gotten married, and Elvie, his wife, his new wife, was pregnant with their first daughter, who is 11 months younger than me.
Oh my gosh.
So he had met her after he got back to Australia.
Yeah.
She'd gotten pregnant right away.
Yeah, back to back.
And,
okay.
Yeah, and they got married, and the rest is history.
Wow.
And 2 ships that passed in the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my story.
Oh my gosh. I have a cousin that she always says things like a little bit wrong, and
my mother-in-law does that too,
and she always says, "Oh, we were just like ships in the sea." And when you said that, I always want to say that, like right before you said it, I wanted to say you were like ships in the sea.
I love that. My mother-in-law does the same thing.
I love it.
She's like, she told me one time I went to her house and I said, "Where is so and so?" And she said, "Oh, she's at a 401k."
Yeah.
I was like, "Do you mean a 5K?" Just
401k.
Like, yes. And where is this, Barbara? It's in placenta. Surely you mean placentia. Just a little bit off.
Just a little bit.
It makes
like,
me
I
laugh.
know what you mean.
6 of one, a dozen of the other.
Right. Right. Totally. That's a good one. Wow. What a story. Yep. Oh my gosh.
Yep. My throat hurts now.
Huh. So that is really interesting. What's so interesting is the feeling of it all making sense upon finding Clive. I mean, it's just how much of the connection resonated or like
yes.
was like you had like a visceral
yes Well, when I met
experience
like
with him.
Rob was like, he looked Italian to me at first, which doesn't really track. But now I'll show you pictures. Now he just looks like me and my father. But yeah, it's like Lynn is just not very forthcoming with conversation.
Has she ever said, okay, you're right?
When I got down to them, I said, okay, what can you tell me about Clive and Max Fisher?
The Fisher boys.
And she said, never heard of him. And I sent a picture, never seen him. The day that, this is good. The day that it was confirmed that he was my father, I put a picture and I said, this is my father, la, 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 la. People were like, oh, congratulations. For some reason, she felt like she needed to come on and say, I'm sorry, I don't remember this man. And I was like, you don't need to say anything, Leah. I'm not trying to out you, so don't out yourself.
Not remembering doesn't necessarily mean anything. Also.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, my half sister on her side got on and said something horrible.
Oh no!
And Rob saw it before I could delete it.
Oh,
and I was like, you can't be here anymore.
This stuff brings sides out in people that are just
Well, and she was accusing. Here's the thing: I can't accuse him of anything because she doesn't even remember him,
right? And
she doesn't seem to have amnesia, and and he doesn't seem
there's
like
just
the
a void
that would So I'm not about to think that anything untoward happened. All I know is that I've read his letters and he seems like a great guy. So what can I do? He was an honorable guy, right? Because obviously somebody else got knocked up, and
right.
I don't know. But yeah,
there's just so many questions that we'll never have the answers to.
That I will never have the answers to. And like I said before, I forgive her, whatever she's going through. And maybe one day she'll have an epiphany, or maybe it literally is a mental block.
Right.
Yeah. Who am I to say? I don't know. And
wow.
I never will unless somebody finds those letters.
Right. The missing.
Isn't that weird?
Right.
Like, really? He just didn't write on those days? I almost feel like somebody said, ooh, this is a little, let's just kind of keep this here and just.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why would he just stop writing for 6 months? Yeah. Like, it seems like from the time he may have met her until he left the country, and then it came back.
Yep. That's really weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's totally like in the movies when they go and they finally find the book they need, but then those pages are ripped out.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Story of my life, man.
Yeah.
So yeah. So So then I became a genetic genealogist and a podcaster.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So now you help other people.
Now I help others. And
you have this amazing podcast.
And I have this podcast. Thank you for calling it amazing.
It's totally amazing.
Appreciate it.
Here's my question.
Yes.
Because you said a search angel.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the things that I just don't know.
Yep.
Maybe everybody else knows, and I'm the idiot here. But what is the difference between a Gen Genie and a search angel?
A search angel is a Gen Genie who searches for free.
Okay.
Basically, a search angel, I was a search angel for a while, and I still do some pro bono work. But they're like people who are just either don't want to do it professionally and just like enjoy help, which I love helping people. I got to a point where I really needed to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I had to, that's how the podcast came about. And then the podcast doesn't make any money. But then,
do you know about that? Do you know the podcast don't make money?
Did you guys know that?
Go to our patrons.
Oh, I need to talk to you about that.
Okay.
So that's the difference. And I was a search angel for a while. I got approached by a PI.
Oh, okay.
Who one of his side companies is a finds. And actually, I found him on Instagram and I saw what the name of the company and I was like, So I'd had a glass of wine, and I said, hey, do you guys need a genetic genealogist?
Right.
And he called me a couple days later. He's like, as a matter of fact, we do. And the rest is history.
Yeah.
It's like, and I will say that for as short amount of time that I have been doing it, I am damn good.
Yeah.
At,
Yeah. Yeah.
at doing this, because it clicks with me.
It makes perfect sense in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. My next question is,
Yes.
Is there a certification or a program or a test or a quiz or a certificate you get to be a genealogist?
There is to be a genealogist, to belong to the I don't know what it's called, the national, I don't know what it's called because I'm not
club?
a part of it, the genealogy club.
Okay.
But yes, there are genealogy standards.
Got it. Okay.
That are set by genealogists. But as far as genetic genealogy, no. If you do genealogy and you use DNA for your genealogy, you're a genetic genealogist. There's you can't be a certified genetic genealogist. You can't. And it was interesting when I first started doing it professionally. A couple people came at me from the community that have been doing it a long time.
Right.
And they decided to have the judgment that I was way too new at this to be doing it professionally.
Oh.
Yeah. And they really, and it kind of, I just said, okay. And it was actually the podcast that was making that they didn't like.
Right.
Because they didn't listen to it themselves, but they thought that I was saying, hey, I'm a scientist.
Right.
Here's what we do. If you listen to the podcast in the very first episode, I'm like, hey, I'm not a scientist. I learned how to do this. I'm going to talk to you about this in layman's terms.
Right.
And it's going to be much more interesting for most of you than the other one, which is why I did this.
It's not a science podcast.
Yes, exactly.
For me.
Right. And most of the listeners. And if I get some things wrong, let me know. I'm trying not to. I'll ask experts if you ask me questions that stump me, which happens. And I'm not going to lie. But guess what? I have this platform and I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And,
it's a whole knowledge set.
It is.
That is really special.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
Cool.
It's fun and time consuming and all encompassing and all of the above. But it's gotten me through a lot of hard times too. It's just been
as a person helping other people or for yourself?
For myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had I won't get into it, but I had a really traumatic experience in the last 3 years. I had something really awful happened.
Oh, yeah.
And that coincided with while this was happening and also became about that. I can't be specific about it.
That's okay.
But it rocked my world and turned my life upside down and to a point where I had to make lemonade and I had to occupy my mind 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I believe that I would not certainly have the podcast if this hadn't happened to me, because I just needed an outlet. I needed to focus on something else to make my mind stop. So, yeah.
100%. I believe it. Yeah. No, I just talked about that in a previous episode about there's a lot of new studies about trauma and the way our brain processes it and the way that we can heal from it. And so much of it is about giving our brains data to process.
Yes.
To heal
yes.
the emotions of trauma. And so it makes sense to me that you would turn to data.
Yes.
And organizing.
Yes. It takes my whole mind, right, because I'm very ADD, and so I really have to focus to do this, and it just makes life so much easier.
You can just immerse yourself in it.
I can immerse myself in it.
And be there and be in the...
The problem is that I'm a little too disconnected from my family sometimes because I'm so into this and I don't want to be distracted.
Let it go. Sure.
Yeah. It's been a lifesaver.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I have PTSD. You would probably know more than me. And I'll tell you about it when we're not on the air.
No, I believe you. I believe you, and I believe that the data organizing is healing. I'm really
I think
the
so
more that actually it's great. This is great that we're talking about this now because that further sort of validates my theories about that and about genealogy and why we're into it.
Yeah.
So one thing we didn't say on this episode, because we talked about it on your episode on your podcast called Cut Off Genes, is that I just did my first mail-in commercial test, my 23andMe test. I just did it here with Julie at her house.
In my dining room. In
the dining room. I scraped my cheeks and spit and spit and spit into a tube.
How's that mini screwdriver doing there? By the way?
It's good. It's great. We used it to open the box. It's a good thing to hold. I guess I have like a fidgety, it's a good fidget. What are those things called? Fidget
toys,
fidget budgets, or something. So that's great. So we're gonna meet again, and I'm gonna go do Ancestry.com as well, and we're gonna kind of go on a journey together, or like a project together. So I'm really excited that we finally got to connect. That'll so that fun. We can start doing that. And this is just so cool. Yeah, this is just so cool. Yeah. So I guess I'll say goodbye to my listeners. Bye, everybody. We're gonna turn it off.
Goodbye, listeners.
And and go listen to Cut Off Genes if you haven't.
Listen to Cut Off Genes. You can find it anywhere you find your podcasts, and you can find us on Twitter at Cut Off Genes Pod. You can find me on Twitter at Jules Jackson. At Jules Jackson with 2 O's. And there's a Facebook group called Cut Off Genes Podcast. It's a secret, private group so that people can speak openly, ask to join and answer a question, and Bob's your uncle.
That was so good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julie Dixon Jackson.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Man, I want to thank Julie Dixon Jackson one more time for having me in her home and for sharing her story with me and for being so welcoming in general. I feel like a real rookie on the scene, and she was so hospitable and kind and easy to be with, and we had a really nice time recording, and she was generous with her time and then was generous to offer more time in the future to go over the results of my DNA test. So I want to talk about that. If you have been following along, you know that I don't share much of my own story here at Everything's Relative. But I think you know that I have not done a commercial mail-in kit before. My DNA test experience was with a forensic paternity test. It was just to test paternity. So I've said it a few times, but I felt like it was important for me to do a test so I could understand better what so many of my guests are describing. And I recently sort of realized about myself that I was avoiding doing it, just mindlessly procrastinating and saying I was going to do it without really committing to the act. And then I contacted Julie about doing a podcast together. And then the day was suddenly here and I was out of time, and I ran into the drugstore and bought this test for myself. And I felt really weird. I felt uncomfortable. Like I was stepping into a world that I can't ever come back from, or taking on knowledge I can't unlearn. And most of all, I just want to talk about, I felt like I was breaking some kind of rule in my family. Like doing this was betraying my parents, or like stepping further into this place that they would just really rather I not venture. But being with Julie wasn't uncomfortable. I was sort of like swept up in the moment. It was fun and exciting to be with her, and I was nervous. And then the next thing I know, I'm telling her like really intimate details of my story. Like I just sort of like barfed it all out on her podcast. And later she gave me the option, of course, to edit it out or take stuff out. And I thought about it, and I decided that wasn't really fair. And like all these people come to me to tell their stories, and they trust me and you with all this information, and it's imperfect and messy and vulnerable. And my story is too. I wish that I had worded it differently, and I wish I had said it better and nicer, and I had been funnier. But that is like life, right? Like wishing it was perfect and discovering it's not, and deciding to learn about and like sort of be in the mess. So those are the things I wanted to say about her episode that I had to say on this episode, because I'm not allowed to have an intro on her episode. You get it. So, yeah, those are the things I want you to know about me about that episode. It's vulnerable having it out there. So go over there and go listen to Cut Off Jeans, episode 79 with Julie Dixon Jackson. If you want to know a little bit more about me and the mess I'm in. And whether you do or not, this is our last episode of season 1. Thank you so much for all of your support thus far. I just really couldn't have done this without the help of so many people and without so much support and kind words. And please know that I'm still here if you want to contact me, eve@everythingsrelativepodcast.com. I'm also on Instagram at everythingsrelativepodcast, and we're on Facebook at everythingsrelativepodcast if you want to contact me at any time. And I'll be back after the holidays, and I just wish everybody a great end of the year, and I will see you next year. Bye. Everything's Relative with Eve Sturgis is produced by Kaylin Egan and Eve Sturgis. Eve Sturgis is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, but the conversations she has on the podcast are not therapy sessions. Logo design by Ivy McNally, and music used with permission by Goodbye the Band.